Hello, everyone out in podcast land. This is the Front Row Movie Reviews, the podcast for people who actually like movies and TV. And welcome to another live review of Star Trek Discovery. This time we're looking at Episode 5, Choose Your Pain. And the first thing I have to say is, in the best Stella voice I can make, Harcourt Fenton Mudd! Whoever's watched TOS knows.
Yep.
We're all about the Easter eggs today. So I'm Scott, and not everyone's deaf. With me today to review this episode is
Mike, back again.
And they keep having me back. Blake is here.
Blake has made the theory that because his video is on, we're getting less views. So let's see how we do this time. We're still doing great though in terms of views. So
I was gonna say, I think the first one Blake was on has the most views. So
yeah, true. But he didn't have video at that point.
I was about to say, there was no video on that one, Mike.
Right. Okay.
Yes. So let's go ahead and talk about Episode 5, which really is the halfway point, or actually past the halfway point for the first half of Season 1. We have quite a few different things going in terms of Lorca being captured, learning more about Starfleet's plans for Discovery, dealing with Klingons again, and dealing with ethics of tardigrades, and as we mentioned already, Harcourt Fenton Mudd has arrived. So let's get our first impressions of Choose Your Pain. We'll go to Blake first.
So I kind of like this episode. I think you mentioned it last week. It's starting to feel more like Star Trek.
Mm-hmm.
And this episode, I think, took that a step further, especially getting into some of the ethical dilemmas and, probably get into more of that in our likes and dislikes. But I think it's definitely feeling more like a Star Trek show now.
Cool. Mike?
This episode is continuing the trend of having the most metal episode names that I can think of. I did really quite enjoy the episode. I do think this was one that I don't know. We'll talk about this, I guess. It had all the ethical dilemmas, but at the same time, did not feel that Star Trek to me. Not as much as your average Orville episode apparently does. But I did like it. It did ask to, I don't know, maybe you'll point some things out for me, but I felt like it asked you to, as the viewer, suspend your disbelief about an awful lot of the minutia in the Star Trek universe. Or
You don't think a hypospray can change your DNA?
The Discovery universe? Well, there was that as just one small example of this whole episode. So, but I mean, I've said it before and I'll say it again. I'm the guy that's willing to check my brain at the door, and I'm even willing to do it to a small degree with a Star Trek series. We're not talking Transformers the movies here. So, and so I'm willing to say that I really enjoyed it as a whole because of what it's doing for the direction of the show.
Yeah, I won't bury the lead. I think this was the most solid episode yet, and I'll talk more about that as we move forward. But I think Discovery has found its feet. There's some things in there that I think I'm agree with you, Mike, on that doesn't make a lot of sense. But I think the characters are figuring each other out. Michael wasn't annoying, and the Klingons weren't annoying, so that's positive too. But let's go ahead and start delving into this a little more and talking about the things that we liked. And we'll go to Mike first.
Sure. And I think you just nailed it. I think the things that were really good about this episode were a lot of the thing that's been strong throughout the series to date. It's the character development and the character interactions between, with one another. I can't remember the medical officer's name, but it was nice to see him back in the series for the second time now.
Culber.
And have a little bit more to say and give you a little bit of a sense of, who he is and what he believes in and his interactions with, holy crap. I just forgot the engineer's name.
Stamets. The scientist?
Stamets.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you. Tilly didn't annoy me quite so much, although I thought the scene in the cafeteria was a little strange. The real strong shining point here, I thought, was Saru in his continuing story. I mean, it's crazy to me that the guy with all the piled on makeup and stuff is the guy who I continue to think is probably the strongest point of this entire series so far. And So those are all the positives that I really have here. I think there's some other little minor details, but that's the big stuff for sure.
Yeah, I think Doug Jones is just a really great actor because he can do so much behind all those prosthetics, and that's basically what he's known for. I mean, I was never really a big fan of Hellboy, but his character of either Abe or Lincoln, whatever they named him, the fish guy,
Abe
Sapien, thank you, was one of the best things of that show because he played it really well, and he's a really goofy, gangly, tall guy, so it kind of works out. When he comes through the door at the end of the episode to talk to Michael, he almost looks like either the Silence from Doctor Who or a Man in Black, the not the Will Smith, but the internet like Men in Black type creepy guys who people have conspiracy theories about. So he's got an interesting shape to him, which makes it even better. Blake, what do you got?
So as far as what's already been covered, obviously the character development. I did like the introduction of Harry Mudd in this one. And, I think that's going to be interesting to see what they set up because obviously that's not going to be a character they show once and forget.
Yeah. No, and actually he's already signed on for 2 or 3 episodes this season, so he will be back.
You can cheat and go look at IMDb and you'll see his name listed several times.
Yeah, exactly. So seeing where that's going to go and what they're going to do with it. And I also like kind of after last week's pace, I felt this was a little better and they moved the story head a distance at time and really got into the consequences of using the spore drive. I still have mixed thoughts on the spore drive, but at least they're getting into the consequences of using it. The seat where he's sitting there with the Admiralty going through it, and they're like, okay, you need to quit using this now. So it's getting a little more into that, which I'm liking. And I also like, Burnham, I agreed, is starting to get much more relatable and likable as a character. I'm going to hold off on Saru till a little later.
Oh, really? Right. So he's going to be another side. Okay. Doug Jones does not get 100% love here.
That's good to say, man. I glossed over the Harry Mudd thing, but I will say, for as much as I always thought that I would hate seeing Rainn Wilson in any show other than The Office, I was 100% right about that.
Really?
But, I don't know. The guy it's weird. But I will say they did such an interesting job of matching up TOS's Harry Mudd with this portrayal and kind of giving it that like grittier sort of look and feel, but it was still very unmistakably the Harry Mudd character that we saw bumbling around the Enterprise trying to not spill his drink. Like I thought it's not necessarily for me, but I still kind of like grinned at it, like I enjoyed it.
Okay, for me, the highlight of this episode, I'm gonna say it, was Harry Mudd. I think.
Wow.
Okay. Harry Mudd obviously was the over-the-top space pirate in the '60s show, but he was also a really good foil for the Enterprise crew, and to a point where he was popular enough where they were talking about doing a spin-off show just of Harry Mudd. It was one of 3 or 4 spin-off shows that CBS was trying to make a Star Trek back in the 60s. It obviously never happened. The reason why that one never happened is because the actor who played Harry Mudd passed away. So that was it. But I like the gamemanship here. I like the fact that Mudd is someone who, he's not over the top in this, but you can see where he has some fun. He keeps talking about Stella. I love his little bug. And the fact that he gets played at the end is perfect for what Harry is. I mean, at the last time we see Mudd not in an animated series, he is being captured by all his android harem that he made and being carted off. So, I mean, it's definitely the guy always has things come to him, and his karma is very, very strong against him. But no, I thought, and the fact that I don't know this guy, I've never watched The Office, but he played him very much like the original series, aside from the high squeaky voice. But everything else, though, this was Harry Mudd. It was just a continuation. It's the first time that this show has actually used continuity and done it to a way where I'm not annoyed. Now, there will be a time when this episode's used continuity that pisses me off, and I'll get to that in a bit, but I think Mudd was used really well. That's just me.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing, I'm having a really hard time with the fact that it's Dwight Schrute, because I did watch all of The Office and I love that series a lot, but it's just, I don't know, it's weird to me.
I can see that. So I mean, if you're already biased towards the guy, that's going to do something to you too.
It's the character of Dwight in that show was such a unique, bizarre character that it's one of those kind of things that, I bet he has problems finding jobs in Hollywood other than Discovery, because it's like imprinted on who he is now.
I haven't seen him do much.
I looked through his IMDb just a little bit ago, and I mean, there have been things, but a lot of indie stuff.
Yeah.
So
another thing that I liked about this episode is, believe it or not, the Klingons didn't annoy the hell out of me, because the Klingons were a B story. We didn't have to deal with religion and eating other humans and whatever the hell they're doing at this time. It was just your standard run-of-the-mill Klingons, and they were there to be Klingons. And even at first, I didn't like the female captain, because I was thinking it was too much, not what I'm used to in Klingons, but I was thinking in my TNG world. But if you watch TOS again and watch Kang and Kor work against Kirk, it's the same kind of thing. They're always kind of doing the spy game stuff. They're always trying to one-up each other in terms of just, intelligence and trying to figure things out. So it was very much TOS Klingons between the two captains, Lorca and, whoever, Bernie-faced chick who will probably be back with a Bernie face. That one. Any other good things about this episode?
I think the one thing I liked was just on the bit when Saru was running his protocol and he asked about the different captains. And I did like the little Easter egg they threw in there. I know you're probably not, but I figured that's probably what you were referring to. But I did like they threw up there. It had Archer up there, it had April up there, it had Pike. So it threw a little bit in to at least acknowledge this universe is existing.
Yeah, and I'll go ahead and say it now since you brought it up. My issue with that scene, I like that Saru is trying to be formulaic and figure out, how do I be captain? And we know that he's going to fail at that, because anyone who tries to be captain by the book and by the numbers always fails. We've seen that countless times in Star Trek. My problem with listing, I think it was Robert April, captain of the Enterprise, Christopher Pike, captain of the Enterprise, William Decker, the crazy guy from Doomsday Machine, and Philippa, who we've obviously seen in this show. We kind of talked about this in a couple of the earlier reviews, and maybe even, Mike, it was our first episode before we even started reviewing, that they're shrinking the universe. If you give me a list of all the greatest captains in Starfleet, and Jonathan Archer was on there as well, captain of the Enterprise, 3 out of the 5 people listed were all captains of the Enterprise on shows that we had seen. So give me a little bit more of a list there that maybe isn't all Easter eggs, so it makes it look like the Starfleet isn't just 4 or 5 guys who know what they're doing and one female. No,
I can totally see that point.
So I mean, but the continuity part, I mean, they're giving props to Enterprise, they're giving recognition to TOS. Obviously, we will see most of those captains in other shows. Actually, all of them. Robert April shows up in an animated series episode. So I mean, I like that those names were in there. It just, again, I think it just shrank the universe for me.
Yeah, I'll say personally, like, I didn't know who Robert April was, and so
he was the first captain of the Enterprise.
Okay, before Pike even, or
yeah. Yep. So we learn in the books, but in the animated series, we learned that Robert April was the first person to take over the Enterprise when it was brought it, onto the fleet, and then Pike was the second captain, followed by Kirk.
Gotcha. So I mean, to me, I do totally see your point about them shrinking the universe. I think that's a fair and valid thing. That whole shot of the names on the wall was totally an Easter egg.
Oh yeah.
Like, I would say Pike's a deep cut. Robert April is like a deep cut. So.
Well, and Jonathan Archer was a shitty captain. Even though I liked Enterprise, he was a shitty captain.
I think you'll get some agreement on that point. and I just want to kind of back and say, like, to me, the highlight of this episode was kind of the Saru story, and that scene at the end where he, walked in and canceled his protocol was the high point of the episode for me. I thought that was kind of the most, like, bringing it home, like, to your point, if you're going to try to be formulaic and follow the example of the previous people, you're going to fail. And I think that was him kind of walking in and going, yeah, no, I know exactly what I did. You don't need to tell me that I made some morally dubious questions or decisions, rather. I
almost read that. I mean, I agree with you. It was a good ending to the episode. I think Blake's going to disagree with us here in a minute, but I see it a little differently. The scene prior when Saru goes to Michael in her quarters, the way I read it is Saru understands he's not fit. He's not fit for command yet. That if they would have followed his orders and they would have done everything he had said, they wouldn't have got the captain back because he would still been trying to rehydrate an alien as opposed to figuring stuff out. And when he tells Michael that I didn't get the training that you got, I was supposed to get that training and you screwed it up by getting my captain killed, that's me hearing Saru say, I know I'm not ready yet. So when he goes back into the ready room at the end, he says, I know I screwed up, and therefore you don't need to tell me I screwed up. I already know I screwed up.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's some of that, but I also kind of read it as a little bit deeper. I thought that kind of was him coming to terms with the fact of, like, okay, now that I've been in the big chair and I've made the hard decisions, like, I get it. Like, I'm not going to be able to just follow the example of, tick the 10 boxes that the computer read to me. Like, it's harder than that.
Mm-hmm. The one other thing I will say, based on all those scenes and everything else we saw on it, we definitely need to see the Enterprise sooner or later now, because you have just showed me that the only ship in the fleet who has a captain who is anywhere competent to be on that list, that's not dead or probably a geriatric, is Will Decker, captain of the Constitution. Mm-hmm. Is that okay? And either or Robert April or Christopher Pike, whoever's in charge of the Enterprise right now. I'm guessing Christopher Pike since he was on the list. So that tells me the only two good captains out there are two captains we've seen. You better show me them in the show sooner or later, even in passing. You better show me those guys, because you're hinting at the Enterprise a lot in this, and you can't do that without giving me a little bit of fun on that too. Mm-hmm. That's the last thing I will add on the positives before we go into the negatives, or if you guys have anything else on positive, let me know. But I will say this: I have been the one who has been the most down on the Discovery itself. I don't know if it's just because it wasn't moving as much, so you got some more beauty shots. But this is the first time I looked at the Discovery and said, okay, I'm okay with it. It's still ugly as sin, and I hate the design. But it doesn't look cheap now. When it's like in that orbit a couple times, when you look at it, and again, it's not moving much, I can see it look like a Federation ship for the first time. So it's starting to, I don't know if it's growing on me or wearing on me, but I'm starting to be okay with the Discovery's design.
Yeah, and I'd agree with you on that. I mean, I think it was the first one of these I was on. I kind of ripped the CGI a little bit for some of the exterior shots, and I'll agree. I think it has gotten better. I don't know if they were going for a certain look in that episode and they just didn't nail it or what, but it has gotten better. I think the beauty shots of the ship, it's showing a lot better now.
It's almost like, they were obviously probably rushed with the special effects. I think maybe they've had some more time for these episodes, so the rendering's getting better. And so it just looks kind of prettier. Before we move on, we did get something in the chat, and I think it's something that we were going to probably bring up anyway, so let's just bring it up now. John Crabb asks, in the last scene of the episode, what was the deal with the mirror holding the image of Stamets after he walked away? Is he out of time? What was that? I have my opinion, and my opinion's probably true since we already know what episodes are coming, but anyone else want to add to answer John Crabb's question?
So I guess mine is, they've already said they're going to go into the mirror universe.
Yep.
And my prediction on that would be somehow they're going to tie in that this whole network spore drive thing is going to cross dimensions, not just space.
Yep.
And I'm betting that's the door opener to the mirror universe.
Yeah, I think you're completely right. I think when you're dealing with quantum physics, you're not just dealing with one dimension; you're dealing with infinite dimensions.
Mhm.
So I think when Stamets tapped in, he even said, "I saw everything. I saw the infinite," or whatever he said.
Yeah.
And that the mirror darkly stared back at him, to quote an episode title
Mhm.
from another TV show of Star Trek. So I think now, that being said, we've never dealt with the mirror universe being able to be actually a mirror. So that's kind of weird.
I said I was going to throw in there. I think I'm wondering if the mirror universe is going to be presented in quite the same way that it was before, and maybe so it's either it's not going to be presented the same way as it was before, or possibly, I mean, there's always the chance that this shot was just a super weird artsy, gotcha moment to end the show on, and they'll kind of dismiss it and say it was something else or whatever. I was going to take this one step further, and I'll refer to you guys too. As far as all of the Mirror Universe episodes that have happened, has there ever been any reference to the fact that like Starfleet knew of the Mirror Universe's existence?
Yes, in Deep Space Nine, it's very clear that they know.
But what about TOS?
TOS, it was a one-off, so
Yeah,
I don't
that's
think.
what I thought.
In the comics and the books, they brought it up more. But really, Deep Space Nine was really the one that said, we are aware that there are other universes and that they have made incursions into our universe. And it actually, Blake, help me out, at least 3 or 4 times the Mirror Universe had an episode on DS9.
Yeah, 3 or 4 easily.
I was going to say I'm aware of several. Yeah.
Yeah, Kinky S&M, Kira Nerys.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So then the only thing I was going to throw out there, and I'm going to take Blake's prediction then a little step further, is I'm wondering if maybe the Mirror Universe is actually the reason that the spore drive ends up never becoming a thing.
Potentially, we know these crazy guys are trying to come over.
Because we seem to have resolved our primary PETA angering issue with the tardigrade in this episode, which I'll say makes me happy because I wasn't looking forward to hearing about that for the rest of the season.
Now you got Stamets getting his nipples pinched.
But yeah, now we got something else going on, and I'm beginning to think that maybe they're going to find out like, oh crap, this network that spans the entire universe might span more than the entire universe, and every time we open that door, we might risk letting something in.
My one concern, and I hope they learn their lesson, and Kurtzman, who is a showrunner and obviously was involved in Star Trek 2009 Into Darkness, has said that this is not a mirror universe. This is not a separate dimension. This is the prime timeline. I hope they stick with that, because I can also see them using this as saying, well, this is a different dimension, and this is a different dimension, and we're not in the prime timeline. That would piss me off. Yes, that would piss. We have to mock him every episode, I know.
If they do that, we will need one of these with an explicit rating for us to share our true thoughts on that.
I was going to say, if they do that, we'll be back. If they do that,
I have that around later.
Yeah, this is definitely the first Star Trek ever to drop the F-bomb. We had some shits before, but never that. True. And it was one of those where I heard her say it, I was like, did that really just happen? And then almost the writers knew I was going to think that, because then they're like, yeah, we did, and we're going to do it again.
Yep.
Okay.
That's cute.
The one other thing I will mention, I don't know if it's a positive or a negative, but I'll just throw it in here before we move on, is I think the show answered one of our questions. I don't think this is Section 31, because it seemed like Starfleet was well aware, everyone was well aware that this is going on, to a point where they said, Discovery pullback, we'll send the rest of the fleet in to kind of pick up the pieces from what you cannot do. So I don't think it's Section 31.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, the fact that they said, they sent the schematics for the spore drive back to Iowa to be mass produced and get them on every ship in the fleet as soon as possible.
We also got a Daystrom Institute reference. This is full of Easter eggs, this episode.
It is. It really was.
I will say that I still wouldn't rule out the Section 31, because I think they've got such a limited amount of time. I don't think they would waste their time on pointless references. And they made a pretty good point in that opening episode to show those black badges.
Yeah, they have not talked about the black badges yet.
They went out of their way to point that out.
Yeah, and it could be entirely possible that what Lorca has been given. I mean, it seems as though he's been given a very special all-access pass to do whatever the hell he pleases, just about. And granted, the other admiral stepped in and said, we want you to pull back because you're showing our hand a little bit too much,
You're playing with your toys too much, basically.
But he could very well be the founder of Section 31 for all we know.
Well, 31 was at the creation of Starfleet. It was part of the charter. Now, that being said, it may have gone off the rails at this point. That could very well be. But we also know we also learned in this episode. I know I'm bouncing around, but there was a lot of meat in this episode. Lorca completely killed his entire previous crew. We found that out today. So I was wondering what you guys think about that. That may be one of your negatives because we didn't talk about it in the positives. But I'd like to hear what you guys have to think about that.
I don't know what to make of that. I mean, I almost could throw this into the negatives column just because, as I kind of referenced, my thought on this episode as a whole was that it asked you to suspend a lot of disbelief and take a lot of things as, at face value. Like, oh, the Klingons just happened to find the right shuttlecraft with the one guy they wanted on it, and they happened to do it in Federation space in plain sight, and among other things. And that to me seems like one of those weirdly improbable things. It's like this guy has some kind of weird sordid history where he escaped his ship, killed his whole crew. He's the captain who survived, which is kind of like the taboo thing. And then what did Starfleet do but turn right around and reward him with like the most extra special assignment and magic power possible? Like, just seems really goofy to me, as well as the fact that he and one other guy managed to escape a whole Klingon ship.
I may be trying to give, an out for this show that it doesn't deserve. I've been known to do that from time to time, but I can see we have not been told that Starfleet gave this command to Lorca knowing that it was like the best command possible. All we know is that Lorca himself recruited Stamets to start working on the spore drive, and we know Discovery is new off the line. So I almost wonder if Lorca's kind of positioned himself to where Starfleet can't not have him involved in the process.
I don't know, maybe, but I mean, you would think if as soon as they started reporting back that they were on the brink of unleashing the ultimate weapon, that if Starfleet didn't have confidence in this guy that blew up his previous crew and somehow made it back to safety, that they would have immediately dismissed him and put somebody else like William Decker in his position.
There's also a question of if they knew.
Yeah.
True.
Yeah, I can see that. Hey, Starfleet, guess what I have? Deal with it.
I will say, though, we've seen that dilemma a little bit, granted not to that extreme. But, go to Picard First Contact.
Yeah.
I mean, that was kind of his mentality, is blow up the damn ship if he had to.
Yeah.
True.
Yeah.
So we've seen that a little bit of that glimpse there. I mean, this is an earlier time in Starfleet where things were a little more, Wild West style. So and that was always Roddenberry's intent to begin. So we've kind of seen this later.
Mm-hmm. We've also saw this in TNG too, with the episode about the Pegasus, the cloaking starship, where the captain and Riker, the first officer, were not even first officer at that time. He was like some kind of junior grade officer. We're the only two to survive. So the captain left the crew to die as well too. So we've definitely dealt with this kind of idea before.
Yeah,
usually the captains are seen in definitely a negative light afterwards.
Yeah, I guess I want to hear the story at this point. To me, this episode was full of a lot of improbable things. Is I guess where I'm getting at, and all of these improbable things kind of just landed in just the right way to, put Lorca in command, to get him captured, to get him escaped.
Yeah.
So now I want to know what the deal is. I want to know what the rest of that story is about, how he managed to destroy his ship and his crew and escape.
And this is why, as I watch this show more and more, I'm almost wishing that the first two episodes were not the pilot. That we would have dove in with the Discovery first, and then had those episodes be flashbacks to tell us why Michael is in trouble. Because I think if I would have got more time with the Discovery and her crew, we'd be better off right now than what we are. Not that I'm, completely against where we're at right now, but I want to know more of the backstory than what I'm getting right now.
Honestly, I think that very thing you said has more to do with the fact that you're starting to accept the Discovery's design even at this juncture.
Yeah.
You missed 2 episodes before you even saw the ship, and now you're just starting to warm up to it because you spent more time with the ship and its crew.
Well, let's get back on the rails here and start talking about things we didn't like. And Blake, talk about Saru and other things, please.
So I do like Doug Jones as the actor, and I like, the way he's been playing the character. I think what I'm disliking is Saru, to me, right, especially after this episode, almost feels like, the older sibling of, well, damn it, the younger sibling's getting everything I felt I was entitled to in his interactions with Michelle or with Michael Burnham. I mean, it should have been me getting the training from the captain. It should have been. It's almost getting a little annoying. I think they could portray it a little different and still get the same point across, is what you guys are seeing in it. To me, it's just coming across a little too much.
I think that's a fair point. I think there are different ways you can look at it, and I don't personally see it quite so much as like, it is jealousy. He outright said so, but I think if Captain Filippo was one of the best known, most famous, accomplished captains in Starfleet, like, hell yeah, you'd be upset if you were this close to being able to like be that person's right hand man, confidant, and then got that opportunity stolen from you.
Yeah.
So I kind of get it.
Well, and again, I'm probably giving supportive narrative, just making my head canon. But I see Saru as somebody who is very much systematic, and we saw that this episode where he's, making a computer program to kind of analyze his decision-making powers and everything else. And so he had a plan. He had a plan that was, I'm going to serve on this ship. She obviously is one of the best captains in the fleet. The computer screen tells me so. And so if I follow step A to point B to point C, I will be the best captain that I can be based on that. And then this this full human from Vulcan shows up and screws everything up.
It's a fun observation I just kind of thought of with that point is the fact that they made reference once again to the notion that when you meet a Starfleet captain, this was from TNG when I remember first hearing about it, but it's when you meet a Starfleet captain, you're not sure what you're going to get, because that Starfleet captain could have been a medical officer, could have been a tactical officer, could have been a science officer. And so to me, the Saru thing is totally like, this is what happens when you have a science officer try to suddenly fill the daddy pants, and they made another allusion to it.
And he filled his daddy pants.
Yes, and they had another reference to that notion with Lorca talking to, I don't know what her name is, but the other admiral.
Yeah, admiral.
Who pretty blatantly said like she was a medical person. Did you guys catch that as well?
Yeah, I caught that. I was just running that through my head. Yeah, you're right. That admiral did kind of make a comment.
Kind of another neat character building thing that they did there.
On the same lines, Lorca didn't call the guy in the prison officer or Mr. or anything else. He called him soldier. So Lorca definitely sees this as everything military, and I'm assuming he saw that before the war had started. So Lorca's definitely got a chip on his shoulder, and he's definitely a military side of things. Whereas, and you're right, the Admiral, Saru, Michael, they all come from a science background. And even the guy who has really the most power on the ship, Stamets, and now really has the most power on the ship, is a science guy too. So I think they could probably drive Lorca a little insane. And his one girl that was on his side and who also had a military security background got taken out. And by the way, I did like the fact that they started calling the creature Ripper. I did appreciate that.
Yeah.
So what else, Blake, do you have, or anything else?
So just a couple. One was there were a couple of the suspension of disbelief things. The Klingon ship all miraculously finding the shuttle, the magic hypes. So just some little things like that. And I'll be honest, I was not a fan of the F-bomb, being used. That just doesn't feel Star Trek-y to me, and I don't know if that's. You have to know they had to have known the Orville was in production, so I don't know if that's an attempt to try to play into that some or what. It just because other than Data's oh shit and Generations, they've gone pretty much, even in the film series, out of their way to avoid it.
Yeah, the only other time I can remember is in 2009 when Spock shows up and Kirk says "no shit" or something like along those lines. But that's about it.
Yeah. This felt a little forced. It was cutesy the way they did it, with again like her saying it, and then Stamets kind of like shining the light on it and being like, "Oh yes, we did."
We went there.
But at the same time, the whole thing was just kind of an unnecessary.
I think it was much like Blake just said too. I think it's CBS saying we wanted TVMA to make sure this show kind of stood out and say, ooh, it's TVMA. So that means we got to get some TVMA every episode. Last episode, we had the security officer getting ripped to shreds. This episode, we don't have as much violence except for the guy getting his head curb stomped. But aside from that...
Still not as juicy as the Event Horizon stuff.
Oh, man. And Blake, I know American History X is one of your favorite movies, you told me. I was thinking back to American History X in that scene.
Yeah, totally.
That was brutal.
Bite the curb.
Yeah, oh God. Oh, every time I even hear that, I'm just like, oh. Mike, what are some things that didn't work for you?
The Klingons didn't annoy me as much, and you're right, it's because they didn't talk. And their squeakiness, their squeaky outfits weren't as noticeable to me.
They did vaporize really easily, too.
You know, we get a sense that either they don't have the same rule about wearing white after Labor Day or what, but I don't like their costumes. And I guess the thing that kind of got me, and I'm definitely no like expert on Klingons, but they sure don't seem very honorable as a warrior society.
No.
You know, I always took it as the Klingons are honorable to themselves. And I think I get that more from the books. When I used to read a lot of TNG books because I had no life back in high school. Mike was one of my friends, so that should tell you one thing right there. But they always play it off as, we don't care about honor amongst people who are less than us. You are a different race. As long as we're honorable to ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
That's fair. I guess the treatment of the prisoners was kind of just a thing that rubbed me the wrong way, and they also continue to be not very impressive warriors when the best they can do is jump out of hallway doors like it's a fun house and somehow simultaneously come through the back of the shuttle and a hole in the roof of the shuttle.
Although
at the same time for some reason, and no one ever goddamn thinks to go look through the front windshield of the ship and see what the guys in there are doing. It bothers the crap out of me. Also, they fly Peacock fighters. I don't know what that was about.
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought up the Peacock fighters. Those make no goddamn sense.
Anyway, Klingons, am I right, guys?
Was this our first? Was this our first red shirt? I mean, we've had people die in an episode, but this guy was there just to die. Was he our first?
I mean, arguably the shuttle pilot that went out to break the windshield.
Oh,
earlier.
Yeah, true. Okay, I guess you'd be
there
right.
There have been a few.
This guy took two, knives to the gut real quick. So
yeah.
I've got my own theories on these Klingons, so I don't know.
Well, we'll get to predictions in a minute, but
they just bother me, and I wish they were just a different race than Klingons, because they could have easily just been named something different, and I would have been fine with everything.
Well, and if those freaking Peacock fighters, which were ugly as hell and made no sense, because if you're having a fighter, why is all of your ship glass? That doesn't seem like a very smart move for space.
Obviously, to attract a mate or something through. I don't know.
But even if they were Romulan, the design would make more sense to me than, because it looked kind of like a bird as opposed to. I don't know.
Stupid. That's what it was.
It was stupid.
And since I'm complaining about ships, they referenced that as a D7 cruiser, and that did not look like a D7 at all.
It looked the most Klingon of anything we've seen in the show so far. But
I mean, if you're going to call it a D7, make it look like a. I mean, you can make it.
They should have called it like a D6 or something.
I know. It's like make it look like a D7. But
I agree. And the scene, that was okay. Could that Peacock fighter that Lorca was on not? Well, I guess they didn't know the Discovery was out there. I guess I just kind of answered that one for myself. I thought that the way the chase sequence went down kind of bothered me.
It confused me too, because he's flying straight towards Discovery. I know it's on stealth mode, but as Star Trek has pointed out, when you can see it out the window, It doesn't matter if it's in cloaked or stealth or anything. It's right there in front of you. So he's flying right towards it. We see a shot of him flying towards Discovery. And then when Discovery hails him, he's like, "Oh, the cavalry's arrived." I'm like, you were flying right at it.
Yeah, what did you think that was?
A couple of... Oh, go ahead.
Yeah. I was saying, you notice they've made, and I think they did it before too in this series, but they made a couple references to running dark.
Mm-hmm.
You know, using terminology that I've not seen out of like a 1940s, World War II era submarine movie.
Well, I think that's the Nick Meyer influence.
There you go.
Well, I think that's very much the Nicholas Meyer influence into this.
Yeah, he definitely. Part 2 and Part 6 were definitely submarine warfare movies. That being said, one of my biggest complaints, and Mike, you were in this boat with me because we didn't see this movie together. Wing Commander. Our biggest complaint was when they're in the ship in space and they're all telling each other, "Be quiet," so they don't hear you. You're in space.
Yep.
Sound doesn't move, and monsters or whatever you want to call it don't gain water when they're in space to rehydrate themselves because there's no water in space.
That was kind of a goofy thing as well. I agree.
That's one of my complaints is the shoot the thing up into space and hope it doesn't die.
This is probably what it wants: suffocation and no water.
I mean, it was. I mean, this is not the first time we've had a discussion of races who are sentient and who can also move about in space, but you just literally shot it out of an airlock and hope for the best. I
mean, that's classic space sci-fi, though. Nothing is ever very accurate, and like the Discovery basically seems like it gets crapped out of the fungal network because it like when it reappears, it's like dropping like.
We're done.
Yeah, it's weird. I don't get it.
Oh, okay.
But, and I'll throw this out, not to let go and endorse other TV shows right now, but if you guys haven't,
because we haven't done that every episode so far.
Yeah, I know. Well, what I was about to say earlier was like, this could turn into an Orville podcast next season very quickly if things don't go right. But no, have you guys seen the series The Expanse? I
have not, but you keep telling me to watch it.
Yeah, I highly recommend it. And it just kind of, there's an episode that I just watched, and I know this, like I'm just starting season 2 now, but where it has some of the most realistic how things would be in space that I've seen. That's all I will say.
Cool.
To the point that like when they go into combat, they like depressurize their ship so that when holes get poked in it and air coming out doesn't like push it in goofy ways they aren't expecting.
Nice.
And I'm like, that's pretty clever.
The last thing I would have just as a complaint on this episode, you guys hit on some of the stuff that I was already going to hit on. And I think this is direction more than anything else. I'm sorry, I'm watching the bottom of the 9th Cubs game and they're 1-1. So every time I see a hit, I get scared. But this was a hit with outs, so I'm good. And it was a sacrifice bunt. Crap. Okay. I think this is more direction than anything else, but the actors continue to make me feel like they're on stage doing Shakespeare. I especially Anthony Rapp. And I know Anthony Rapp can act. I've seen him act in several things. I don't understand why he is coming off like he has a stick so far up his ass it's coming out the top of his head. I don't understand that.
I agree.
It's the same with the Doctor, Culper. He's kind of hoity-toity. And then who's the other one who's really annoying me? Well, Michael, that's the other one. She is coming off as just completely one note, too. I mean, she's trying to show emotion. And I don't know if it's just the whole Vulcan thing, but she's not pulling it off very well. So
for me, she comes off more natural than Stamets does. And
Stamets is the worst one. And again, I don't know why he's making this decision. I can get if you're the asshole scientist, go with that. Freaking Dr. McCoy. I almost called him Henry McCoy. That's Beast. Dr. McCoy in Star Trek was an asshole doctor. You can play that very well. And but no, he's coming off just as like somebody I really don't like at all.
Yeah, and as much as they've not, like in this episode, beat us over the head with the fact that Stamets is gay, it does make me wonder if there's some just weird like direction being given to him. Like, hey, act super unnatural because that's your character.
We would like you to act autistic, please. Okay, understood.
It is really weird and distracting. Every time I see him, I want to like him and I want to like his character, and I struggle.
Yeah. So that's my major complaint is the direction and the acting. I think they need to fix that. Because that, I mean, again, we talk about Orville a lot, but the one thing that I really think that Orville is doing so much better, well, there's many things, but one thing that's doing so much better in the Discovery is the actors, and I know it's a comedic show, so it makes it a little easier, but the actors actually act like real people, and so they're very much more likable because of that. Anything else you guys want to complain about? No, okay. Let's
Peacock Fighters. That's pretty much it.
Yeah, that's a big one.
Let's go into our final points on this. If we have anything else we want to talk about this episode, and then scores, and then we'll talk about what we think is going to be coming up in the rest of the season again. So we'll go to well, first off, how we score these episodes is we give a 1 to 10, and we base the score off comparison with other Star Trek episodes. So a 10 would be one of the best Star Trek episodes of all time. A 5 would be an average Star Trek episode. A 1 would be Threshold, or what we say the other one was last, Code of Honor, a few other ones like that. So Blake, give us your any final points you may have, and as well as your score.
So again, I think this is really getting more into what Star Trek is as far as an episode. So, and I think the series overall is being very well done at this point for a first season of a Star Trek series. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to go back to a 7 on this one.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Mike, what do you got?
It's kind of funny. I feel like we did a flip-flop on this one because for me, I'm going to give it a 5. And really? I'm just going to say, yeah, I mean, it's weird because I'm even flip-flopping on how I normally treat this show. To me, generally speaking, I am okay ignoring the minutia in favor of the overall story. And in this case, I am accepting of the overall story, but a lot of the little things just bug the crap out of me. And it's just kind of right now getting in my way a little bit.
For me, I'm going to give this it's teetering between a 7 and an 8, but I think I've been scoring these things too high as we've been going. So I'm going to give it a 7. And as I told you guys at the beginning, I think this was the best one so far. And I think it is, as I mentioned last episode, the most Star Trek episode. And a couple reasons why for me. The A and B story tied together. Not that, I don't mean they tied together, they were searching for Lorca, but the themes in the A story, which was Lorca on the Klingon ship, tied into the B story. And the fact that they had to, have ethical decisions, who's going to take the pain, who's going to take the pain with the spore thing and everything else. That's very Star Trek. And also, we are starting to dive into the story more, which I appreciate a lot. We're starting to understand what this universe looks like, where the battles are happening, what Starfleet is doing, how Discovery works into that. So it's not doing the mystery box crap anymore. It's starting to answer my questions. I know more about Lorca now. I know more about Discovery. I know more about Starfleet. There's still a lot they need to answer for me, and the one big one's going to be what the hell is with a spore drive not being around 10 years from now. But at least they're moving towards that point, I think. So I give it a 7, and it's my favorite so far of the series. So a couple things we have learned since last we spoke. The news has come out that they are in negotiations for season 2. This comes from the president of CBS in an article. He was saying that negotiations are going well. The other thing that CBS has said is that they are up to 2 million subscribers on CBS All Access. Now, what they wouldn't tell us is what the boost was for Star Trek. Were they at 1.8 million and they got an additional 200,000? Or were they at 80,000 or 800,000 they got 1.2 million? They won't say. But they are at 2 million subscribers, which ain't bad when you're getting $10 a month off people. So if this continues on, I know we've had a lot of discussion on where the drop off will be. Will there be a drop off? Will there be an uptick when the series goes on a hiatus? Whatever. But all inclinations coming out of CBS, and there are no rumors coming out that are different than this, is they're happy and they're talking about putting together a season 2. So I think There hasn't been an announcement yet, but I do believe that we'll have an announcement before too long. So let's go into predictions for season 1. Blake, you said you had some theories on the Klingons, so we'll start with you.
So I've kind of got 2 predictions. The first is I think this episode opened the door for we're going to see a little bit of a slowdown because they mentioned that they're pulling the Discovery off some of what it's been doing with these jumps. Mm-hmm. So I think we're going to see some episodes where they really get into some of the Star Trek. They're trying to find a way to do it without the creature now. So I think we're going to see some of that now. Mm-hmm. But the other part, and I really hope I'm wrong here, comes in with the Klingons. And I'm almost wondering if we're going to get to the end of the season and find out we've not really been dealing with the Klingons, but some either offshoot or, almost, I'm thinking the Nemesis when you had the Romulans and the Remans.
Mm-hmm.
I can, because you've not seen any of the major houses we know. We know the House of Moog is around now. We've not seen it. We know Duras is around. We've not seen Duras. We've not seen Martin. We've not seen any of the houses we know exist within the Klingon structure.
And we know the House of Moog isn't here because Michael Dorn turned down the cameo.
Yeah.
He actually said, he wanted me in the show, but the cameo was so small, I said, hell no. I think he's also bitter because he was trying to get his own Worf show off the ground for a very long time. But you're right. We don't see any of those houses.
So, that's why I'm almost wondering if they're not going to pull that kind of a stunt on us at the end and use that to explain, to fit this all in, that either we're dealing with some either smaller race in the Klingon Empire, but not necessarily the Klingons themselves. Because they even said in the first episode or 2 was, no one's seen the Klingons in 100 years. So it's conceivable no one would know exactly what the hell they're dealing with.
Potentially, yeah. Mike, what do you got?
I definitely think that the Spore Drive is going to be we already know it at this point, it's going to be the catalyst for the Mirror Universe. I am predicting, like I said, that I think the Mirror Universe might actually be the reason or the way they explain why the Spore Drive never becomes a thing in the rest of the series. And I guess my main prediction, aside from that, is that I'm really up in the air on what I think is going to happen with Lorca. And I feel almost like the fact that this episode focused so heavily, as you said, the A story really was following Lorca on the prison ship. It's starting to make me think that he's really not going to turn out to be the bad guy that we all thought he was in the beginning. So I guess we'll see. And I do agree with what Blake was saying, at least to the degree that I think a lot of what we may see in the rest of season 1 may be a lot more Klingon focused than what we've seen so far, as they're kind of talking about or hinting at taking the Discovery off the front line and letting it chill for a little bit. And frankly, at this point, with the tardigrade out of the picture, I'm kind of thinking that there's only a couple episodes worth of story to tell there. Depending on how this Mirror Universe thing goes. So they may well pad the season out with more Klingon story, which I don't know how I do know how I feel about it. I'm not looking forward to it.
Yeah,
if that's true. So
the reason why I like this episode more so than any other one was because there wasn't that offshoot to Kuvma or whatever the hell you want to call it, guys. They weren't in this episode at all, and I was okay with that. Very okay with it.
We've already gotten plenty of hints that there's going to be more of that.
Yeah. I agree with what you guys are saying. I don't know about the offshoot of the Klingons. I think they're gonna go all in on this and say these are our Klingons. But I wouldn't be surprised if I was wrong on that and Blake was right. I do think that definitely the Mirror Universe is going to tie very much in with the Spores piece. Another thing that came out because first. Jonathan Frakes let it slip that there were going to be Mirror Universe episodes, and then there was a picture taken of Jason Isaacs on the bridge of the Discovery, and when you zoom in on the plaque behind him, it's ISS Discovery. So obviously they're doing the Mirror Universe, and now Kurtzman has said there will be several episodes dealing with the Mirror Universe. And so with that, we know, I think you're right, Mike, that the Spore Drive and the Mirror Universe are going to go hand in hand. I think that's going to be one of the reasons why we cancel the experiment there.
I think to the point that the Mirror Universe may end up being the big bads in season 1 more so than the Klingons.
I'd be okay with that because these Klingons bore the shit out of me. So I'd be completely all right with that. As long as Lorca shows up with a goatee, I'm good. But yeah, So we've got that. The other thing is I'm interested to see is one other thing we learned was that episode 9 was supposed to be the starter of the next chunk of season in 2018. They have moved it to be the last episode we will see in 2017. So I'm interested to see what that story will be and how that ties in, because obviously things are a little different now in terms of how they're trying to tell us this story based on that change.
Mhm.
And I'm also kind of interested to see how much of these Easter eggs are going to start popping in more. I was just doing some looking. There are fans in the writer's room, and the Dodgers just won. Lovely. There are fans in the writer's room. Shut up. You're in Oregon. Shut the heck up.
Yes, but if I can annoy a Cubs fan, I will do it from far away.
Sigh. Okay. I will go be in pity here in a moment. But what was I saying? No, there are fans in the writers' room, and I was looking at it. The fans joined the writers' room episode 5. So this is the first episode that they were there. I hope to God they're not just feeding Easter eggs for computer screens every episode.
I hope to God, but because they've established that they can go anywhere. Oh, they did say known universe. I was just going to say, I hope to God we don't see Borg. I said it before, and every time they talk about how they can go anywhere they want, I'm like, God damn it, we're going to see Borg.
Yeah, that's season 2, sir.
Yeah,
okay. Well, now that we're 2 games down, I'm gonna go live in peril or fear of the Dodgers now. But okay. So there was one question that came across the chat that I do want to answer because he's still here. John Krapp asking, and John's the only guy asking questions today, but he said, thanks for answering his question. Well, you're welcome. I'm wondering if you guys have ever seen Star Trek Continues. If not, he says it's quite good, and of course it's not canon. I have seen several of the episodes. I think the acting is fan film acting. So I kind of stopped watching it. But have you guys seen it at all?
I have not.
I have.
Blake, what's your opinion on it?
Yeah, the acting kind of is fan film acting. Yeah, I'll go with that. It was. I'm not gonna say it was painful to watch, but it certainly wasn't an enjoyable experience.
Nice. Okay, well, we're going to go ahead and wrap it up there. Thanks for everyone tuning in to our live broadcast. And if you are checking us out on the podcast or on the YouTube link later, make sure you like and subscribe and give us a review. And we will be back here every Sunday night as long as Discovery is going, so another 4 weeks for this year. And then we'll figure out what we're going to do after that as we wait for the second chunk of Season 1 to come up. You can always find us at thefrontrowmoviereviews.com. You can email us at thefrontrowmoviereviews@gmail.com. I am Scott, and with me has been
Mike
and Blake.
And until next time, just remember, it's me, not you.
See.